I will go ahead and call to order the City of Burlington's Board of Finance meeting on Monday, June 15th, 2026 at 4:35 p.m. Our first item is the agenda. Is there a motion on the agenda? So moved by Councilor Carpenter. Is there a second? Second by Councilor Barlow. Any further discussion before we vote? Being none, all in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay? Motion carries unanimously. Our next item is the public forum. Public forum, our practice is first to go to members of the public in the room and then online. And if anyone is here, I'm seeing only city staff, but if anyone would like to do public comment, just okay. Moving on to online. So we'll go online, and I see former City Councilor Sharon Busher. Good evening, Sharon.
Good evening, and I know tonight is really budget night, but you do have an item on your agenda which has to do with UVM and the request to extend that fee-for-service agreement for another year, which I support. I would ask the mayor and her administration to also, during those discussions, hopefully bring up a retired commitment regarding housing. Garamella and Vice President Kate abandoned that, but there was an agreement for years and years regarding they would house a certain percentage, like 65% of the total enrolled student population. And it would be really good for the administration and for the city to know where we left off and are we at that goal? I understand enrollment is anticipated to shrink, but I'm not suggesting to roll that back. I am suggesting that we look at that commitment and explore whether or not a commitment like that would serve us well in the future. And when you look at that, Mayor and your administration, look at not only the undergrads, but grads, medical students, et cetera, because I think that's all relevant. So thank you so much for listening to a comment that's not totally germane to your agenda tonight, and good luck. Thank you.
Thank you, Sharon. If anyone else online would like to address Board of Finance and public comment, please raise your Zoom hand. Seeing no one else, I will close public forum and we'll move on to our consent agenda. Is there a motion on the consent agenda?
Move to adopt the consent agenda and take the actions indicated.
Moved by Councilor Barlow. Thank you. Is there a second? Second by Councilor Travers. Any discussion on the consent agenda before we vote? Seeing none. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Moving on to our first deliberative agenda item, item 4.1, which is a traffic work group reorganization with our Parking Services Division at the Parks and Public Works. Welcome to both of you. Take it away.
Sure. Chip Spencer, Director of Public Works, and I'm here really to just turn it over to Jackie Sparty, Division Director of Parking and Traffic, and just say that this partnership with HR and our friends with AFSCME really has borne fruit, and I'm very excited with this proposal.
Okay, we're coming here today looking for your approval to reorg the traffic division of Works to better meet the future needs of the city. First, I want to thank AFSCME HR for the deep engagement and partnership on this effort here today. Within the traffic work group, we currently have two separate work groups: signals and traffic maintenance. Signal group is responsible for all things related to traffic signals. Maintenance team is responsible for street signs, line painting, sign printing, meter installation and maintenance, etc. We're proposing to merge the two groups into one cross-trained team so that the small group can effectively respond to the needs of the day. We're proposing, or the proposed 3-tier position allows for entry level up to experienced signal techs. So employees can grow in their career and not have to wait for a position to open up. This reorg also updates and reclassifies the working 4-person job to include a technical signal certification and traffic signal inspector certification, which will serve the city well, given the upcoming work for the group. With the reorg, there's no change to the staffing level. So overall, the additional cost is about $32,000, which is approximately 1% of the overall traffic fund budget. As a self-sufficient special revenue fund, the traffic fund can cover the additional expense in fiscal year 27. The proposed cross-trained tiered staffing approach will achieve greater efficiencies and deliver a positive return on investment. There is an attached MOA which details how the reorganization will be implemented. The MOA provides staff 12 months to complete all the proficiencies and certifications in their respective job descriptions. Additionally, the MOA makes clear that the senior signal tech who has a higher signal certification than what the new jobs require will keep their current grade until they vacate the position. Once they do vacate, the position will return to the associated grade for the tiered position. We're excited to continue working on a Safe Streets for All grant, which is 9 new intersections on the west side of Main Street. This reorg will help on this work. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Jackie. Questions or comments? Right, we have a big agenda, so. Anything else to add, Jack or Jason?
This effort with the union was a significant team effort, and one of the things I'm most excited about is the cross training. This group has already done a number of construction projects this year. One of the last signal, I believe, other than limited access highway that didn't have a pedestrian signal was Willard and College, and the team did the project entirely themselves with just used a contractor for the directional drill. And that kind of initiative and skill is something that's very valuable to us, saves us money and gives us more control over the product. So kudos to the team for really stepping into a more construction, more technical role moving forward.
And with that, is there a motion?
I would move the adoption of that as posted on Civic Work.
Thank you, Councilor Carpenter. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilor Travers. Any further discussion before we vote? Seeing none, all in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Thank you. Moving on to our friends at Fletcher Free Library, item 4.2 is a Fletcher Free Library Transformational Remodeling Project, Door and Whittier contract, second contract amendment for the design, development, and construction documents. Welcome, Mary.
You. It's exciting to be here because this is a real milestone for us. Getting ready to get to these documents, which are the design documents and the construction documents. We've been working with Doran Whittier since schematic design, and in the original RFP, we put in to continue with them as long as we like the services they've been providing, and we have. They also were the architectural firm that we worked with when we did the preservation piece of this project. But now we're ready to move to the real documents that will provide us the guidance to really doing the big transformational remodeling project. And going back to 2017, this is based on what we have gotten from the community of what they want for their downtown library, which is more meeting rooms, more bathrooms, better teen space, an upgraded youth space. So all those things are going to happen, and this is a big milestone. So.
Thank you, Mary. It's really an important moment for the city. I'm excited about this next step. Questions or comments from the board?
Comment, and because I haven't participated in any of your programming actions. And kind of subsequently, at least the last couple of years since I've been on the council, we resurrected the Accessibility Council and the Aging Council. So I'm just asking that they get reached out to, as you. I'm not sure they were part of the original programming group, but.
They weren't, but we definitely will. That's a really good reminder.
Yeah.
And Glenn McCrae, who's a former library commissioner, is always in my ear.
Okay.
About the aging piece too. So
Thank you.
And anything else, Councilor Travers?
Yeah, very exciting. Thank you very much for being here. Can you provide a bit more detail on, if we take action on this, sign off on the agreement, what you think the timeline here is in terms of when you would anticipate, and no guarantees in this space, but when you anticipate the design and drafting phase would be complete here?
Sure, so I'm excited, I mean, the city's been wonderful to work with on this, we're gonna be doing something a little bit different, which is what school did, is we're gonna use a construction manager at risk. As I think you know, when the school did it, it allows you to value engineer throughout the project. So that's working through that, it's a little bit new for us, there's not a lot of boilerplate out there, but they have been getting great support from CNO Shad and the city attorney's office on that. So that's what you'll see next as that comes up. That process to get, because we want to get them on board during the design piece as well, because they can even help us value engineer at that point. That will probably take a couple months to get that going. I estimate that it'll take about 18 months for both DD and CP to get done. And then they tell us there's about a shelf life of about 18 months for those documents, just because things can change. And of course, we're still doing fundraising. We're in the quiet phase. We're still working on our lead donors. You know, we can start construction when we're at 85% of the goal, which was in the MOU that the city had signed with the Friends of the Fletcher Free Library that are doing the fiscal management of this. So it's hard to say, but definitely we're looking at 2027.
Okay. And I know that the costs of projects, especially these days, can be volatile. But at this point in time, do you have any sense, and I'm trying to remember back to the MOU that we signed off on, what we're anticipating the all-in cost of this project might be?
It's a great question. The all-in cost is 35 million, and we are determined to stay in that. And we have to, because we have so many private philanthropic donors, and we have made that promise to them. So again, this whole value engineering throughout is going to be really an important piece, because of exactly what you said, the volatility of the construction industry right now. Like, we even learned from going from schematic to this point, some things only went up by 4%, other things went up by 15%. So we just got a current estimate not that long ago, which was a little bit higher than we thought, but they said, don't get too worked up about that, because in 3 months things can change too. But there are some areas where we definitely know we're going to have to change the scope of the project a little bit to stay in that $35 million price tag, but that's not unexpected. We've been planning for that all along.
And are you at liberty to provide an update as to where the Friends are and their percentage target here towards that goal?
Sure. Yes, because if there's anybody out there who has millions of dollars, this would be a great time to come in. And we do, and I will say, we do find that when people see that you've reached a critical point, and I think we're past 50%. So we're at 18.6 million. And that includes the preservation project that we just finished, but that was always part of the project as well. But yeah, I'm hoping, we do have some, like I said, some other donors that we are engaging with and are engaging with this summer. And we hope that they can see, look, this is happening. They're already more than halfway there.
Thank you.
Good question.
That's great news. Thank you to the Friends.
Yes, yeah, they've been lovely to work with, and it's just been a great partnership with the city. I think it's probably the biggest public-private partnership that we've had on a city building ever.
That's our library director always appreciate it. I think that's a very important point, though, in terms of just really the size and scale of this important endeavor and the investment by community members. Sorry to jump in briefly, but I just think that's a really important thing to underline here. So thanks, Mary, for that. Anything else from our board? Then is there a motion on this item? Councilor Barlow. Thank you. Is there a second? Second by Councilor Travers. Any further discussion before we vote? Seeing none, all in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much, Mary.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you,
And some
everyone.
friends, who I think I saw some of them online, so thank you
Yes,
to my
yeah.
friends, yeah. All right, moving right along to our next item, which is item 4.3, an extension of the letter of agreement between the city of Burlington and the University of Vermont. And our Department of Finance and Administration will present on this with. Wait, who? Yeah. I was like, what is that fancy going? That means. Okay.
Yes, so we are coming to you tonight to ask for an extension of the existing letter of agreement with UVM. For people who may be watching at home, this is one of 3 agreements that we have with UVM. It is probably the main agreement because it is the most amount of money. But UVM is also in a separate agreement with us, a 10-year agreement that started in 2018 specific to capital. So they are paying us a flat amount from 2018 to 2028 to cover capital needs. And we have a separate agreement that is a payment in lieu of taxes for the UHC building. And then this is the main agreement that is also sort of what we call the fee for service agreement. And it is our intention over this next year to negotiate a new agreement, and I'll turn it over to the mayor in a minute because Sharon brought up some good points about how historically we have tied in some way the fee for service and the housing agreements have been sort of linked. And we are preparing to do that again. But tonight, we are just asking for approval to extend the fee for service agreement as it has been in operation since July 1 of 2018. And since that time, the agreement has included a 2% per year escalation for inflation. And so as we agreed with them that it was in the interest of both parties, the city as well as UVM, to do 1 more year of an extension while we prepare a much larger, more in-depth renegotiation. The 2% increase was already in place and has been something that we have done since we signed this. And although it's in effect since 2018, we didn't sign it until 2019. So that's a little bit confusing, but that 2% has been used since. And so that's what we are proposing. At this point, I will say that the amount of work that was required on the city side just to get ready for negotiations was a lot more than I thought on the DFA end, because this does touch a lot of different city departments. Police, fire, DPW are the big ones, although there are others. And because this had been negotiated in the 2018-2019 timeframe, there were not very good records, frankly, about everything that had gone into what made up the base amount for UVM. So I've been working with Ashley Parker, and we have done all of that research, and we are very well prepared on our end to commence those negotiations. And so this puts us in good standing to have plenty of time to do that, to bring things back and have a full discussion with both this body and city council. Anything you would like to add, Mayor?
I will simply add, just be given former city councilor Sharon Busher's comment, just to build off that a little bit more. even though we were not able to bring all of the various pieces that the CAO mentioned together before June 30th to present a comprehensive and modernized, I would say, agreement and terms. I've been working diligently all year since Dr. Trump began her presidency at UVM to really create the conditions for us to find some commonality around the need to address housing and the needs to address larger community well-being, because we're intertwined. You've heard me say that before, between UVM and the health and well-being of the city. And there is a real, shared set of values around that, which is very encouraging to me. And in particular, thinking about how we can update our housing, even though student enrollment is projected to decline, where you've seen that news in the incoming class for UVM, some real openness to think about creative ways we can think about housing and partnerships between the city and UVM, and having that really be reflected in a new way, a new framework of thinking about housing and this set of negotiations and work we'll do in the coming year. And I've also mentioned this before, but for folks who may not be watching prior meetings, Dr. Trump has actually been a leader with the current mayor of Boise, Idaho, around some exciting housing options that the university she was originally leading in Boise and the city of Boise did in collaboration around graduate students and also housing for folks in the community who are, I believe, families exiting homelessness. All to say, I think there's great promise here, and I have some confidence going in around also some openness of understanding that we need to modernize our formulas, our assumptions, and also for just internally as a city documenting better justifications for those assumptions we have around the fee. One last thing I'll just say, a perfect example is we all know whoever makes fire trucks is making a boatload of money on municipalities across this country. Shout out to Senator Sanders if he wants to maybe work on this and investigate it. But that alone, the inflationary number or chart, I'm sure line chart for just providing fire trucks and the support we need, including the ladder trucks in particular for UVM support as well as the rest of the city, has gone up way more than 2%. So just us getting more time to have some more time in the leads is going to be beneficial to the city, but also I think in our relationship with being straightforward with the university. That was probably way more than I intended to say, but I hope that's helpful for background. With that, I'll open up for any questions from the board. Councilor Barlow.
Well, thank you for that. And obviously I'm supportive of the extension for tonight because I don't know what other alternative there might be. But well, I know the university is under a lot of financial pressure, as is the city. And I know this is a negotiation, so I don't want to get into details, but the mayor alluded to the fact that the cost to provide these services has probably increased it beyond the 2% anticipated in the current agreement in the last at least 3 or 4 years. And I'm just wondering about the university's ability to take on the additional costs that might represent our portion, and might one of the outcomes be that there's less services provided by the city to the university. I mean, I maybe you haven't gotten into all the details of it, but it seems like we need more. They might not have the ability to give more, but is that like also sort of going into your prep for these negotiations?
Certainly, I think it's premature to kind of know what that would actually be in detail, but at least generally. There's been a lot of evolution, including our staffing levels at BPD, et cetera. So I think if we're going to open up, we really have to open up to what they are doing on campus and what they fundamentally still need from the city, but also widening the view of what we were discussing a year plus ago around the water bonds, for example. A functional water reservoir next to campus is beneficial to as much to UVM as it is to the city. So those are not necessarily things that were imagined, I would say, in the prior agreement. So thinking a little more comprehensively. I also appreciate that we are two creative leaders who could really think beyond perhaps old ways of defining terms and think about creative ways to kind of move forward in partnership. So even if in the immediate years, if we can't necessarily jump to exactly where we would be, I think we can make some big steps forward, but also then add in some other creative opportunities, as I keep alluding to. And I should just put a finer point on the Boise example. I believe that was university and city-owned land that abutted each other and working together kind of to leverage other assets besides what might be simply like a straightforward check to the city. I think there could be check to the city and then some other things on top of it. And everything I see under Dr. Trump's leadership is her really imagining into the future. And not to go too sideways here, but just at the end of the session with the discussion in the legislature around the investments in the Gutters Field House, but really from the place of a convening point for the state of Vermont for large scale events, not just athletics. And that's a really important point, but to leverage that here in Burlington and the amount of traffic that will bring locals in particular is such a strategic investment from UVM. That's the kind of thinking that I'm seeing. And I just want to illustrate for folks that shows a great understanding of what economic and just vitality in general that they can leverage on behalf of being UVM to the city of Burlington. So again, I think all head in the right direction, and I'm looking forward to these conversations.
I appreciate that. I appreciate this idea that we're gonna be looking at more than just a bus X for a fire truck or whatever. They may have capacity to help us with problems, and maybe there could be other things that have imagined.
Yep. Other questions or comments on the board? Is there a possible motion out there?
To approve and recommend that the city council approve a 1-year extension to the letter of agreement between the city of Burlington and the University of Vermont dated June 24th, 2022.
Thank you, Councilor Barlow. Is there a second? Seconded by Councilor Carpenter. Any further discussion before we vote? See none. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Moving on to our next item, 4.4, an approval to execute the master lease, also with our Department of Finance and Administration. Oh, hi, Brad. Welcome.
Brad Kuchenberger, Director of Finance for the record. So I have three rather perfunctory annual topics right in a row here. We'll start with the first one, item 4.4, to execute the master lease. Each year in the late winter, early spring, we solicit the city departments to see what large pieces of equipment or other types of vehicles they may need to procure. And if there's sufficient dollar amounts attached to those vehicles, we do an RFP for a master lease. This year we had a truck or wastewater. It looks like a Ford F-350, and then very humongous snow removal vehicle equipment. I don't even know what you'd call it. Not a mechanical person, but those two items totaled $2,733,763. Majority of that being the airport snow removal item. We put out an RFP in April 24th and received 4 bids, and we are recommending to go with the lowest bid by a bank funding LLC. The total will be a 7-year term. The full cost will be $3.31 million at an interest rate of 4.08%. And I'm happy to. Any questions on that?
Thank you, Brad. Questions or comments from the board? Councilor Carpenter.
You said it was an airport thing, and I know that the airport basically.
I had to look it up. Yeah,
It's back for their share, but why would we combine it as opposed to the airport doing it itself?
Because there is wastewater needed a like larger pickup truck that would satisfy the terms of going out for a master lease.
But that's to our advantage to
Yeah,
include it with the.
yeah, we try to get them all and do everything in one, and this being that these are airport and wastewater vehicles respectively, it would be a cost necessarily to the general fund, but Darlene Bako, our Assistant Director of Finance, does a really good job of coordinating all of this with our our bond counsel and other folks, PFM advisors to do this. So it's just kind of a service that we provide.
Other questions or comments? Is there a motion?
I would move the, this, forward, as stated on the civic clerk.
Thank you, Councilor Carpenter. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Councilor Travers. Any final discussion before we vote? Seeing none, all in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much, Brad. You're there. And we're actually going, I'm gonna propose we take the next two. I think they're interchangeable, as I understand, item 4.5 and 4.6.
Yeah, we could do them together.
Okay. So 4.5 is a resolution approving the issuance of a grant anticipation notes for the cost of airport improvement projects. And item 4.6 is also a resolution approving the issuance of a grant anticipation note for the cost of certain city capital improvement projects. Take it away.
Sure. So these are two GANs. So we utilize this grant anticipation note for cash flow purposes. The airport has a lot of projects going on and uses this GAN and pays back through an FAA allowed at 100%. The interest is reimbursed through the passenger facility charge program. And so they tend to use it pretty regularly as they need to pay contractors and waiting for revenue from the feds. And this is something that the airport has been doing for a number of years now. The general fund grant anticipation note is from a mixture of larger or based solely on the pledge of underlying grants that are kind of the larger grants that the city is working under. So that work would include the Champlain Parkway, Bank Cherry Pine, St. Paul Street reconstruction, et cetera, those types of projects. This is the second year that the general fund GAN that we'll be requesting that one. Each are for $10 million, and it's sort of a revolving loan opportunity if you need cash flow purposes. I do know that the airport uses theirs at intermittent times throughout the year pretty regularly. Last fiscal year 26 was the first time we had the general fund GAN available to us, and from what I understand, we came close to using it once, but didn't end up having to use it. But it is a pressure release valve, especially through the between November and May, or March, excuse me, where we have a lot of large invoices due from the previous construction season, winter maintenance, and also it's the longest run between property tax payments due throughout the year. So it is something that is valuable, but to the extent possible, we don't use it. Happy to take any questions on those.
Questions or comments? Councilor Barlow.
So, thank you. Is essentially a line of credit.
Yeah, more or less. It's instead of pledging the city's assets or the airport's assets, it's we have these signed commitments with grants that are guaranteed to a certain extent, and we can draw from the GAN. It does cost a little bit of interest, not much, and then we can pay it back when we receive the reimbursements through the feds, and primarily those are the grant. So. But yeah, it's a lot.
We don't need to get into it now because I don't want to pack the agenda. I'm just curious why we use that instrument and not just a straight line of credit to consumers. it seems complicated and. But we don't need to get into it now. I'm supporting.
I'd be happy to have that conversation
I'll come to you all
at a
on
different time.
to understand.
Thank you, Councilor Barlow. Any other comments or questions on this, on these two items? We'll take separate votes, but on either item. Okay, so is there a motion on item 4.5, which is the first resolution related to the airport projects?
Also, resolution, excuse me.
Thank you, Councilor Barlow. Is there a second on item 4.5? Council Carpenter, thank you. Any further discussion on this one?
I was just gonna comment, the reason we do GANs is the asset is not general fund, and so really. It's better to use the asset of the airport than the general.
Good observation, Council Carpenter. Any other comments or questions? All right, then we're gonna vote on item 4.5. The motion is on the floor. All in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed, nay? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. On to item 4.6 for the vote. Is there a motion on item 4.6, which is the resolution related to city capital improvement projects?
So moved.
Thank you, Councilor Carpenter. Is there a second? Seconded by Council Barlow. Any further discussion on this one? Seeing none, all in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed, nay? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Thank you, Brad. And then back to our friends at DPW with water resources is item 4.7, Cherry Street Water Distribution Improvements, step numeral 3, DWSRF loan application and Cherry Street sewer collection improvements.
Yes, let's go
Welcome.
on. It is online as well. Great. Yeah, so this is the water and sewer portions of the Cherry Street, Great Street project, and we are going through the state revolving fund to fund it separate from the other portion of the project, even though there is some earmarked money for the larger project towards water and sewer. We are seeking SRF money to cover what we're doing, and what we are doing is replacing water lines that are older than the 1970s. Basically, there's a lot of old water pipe there, and we will be getting that up to standards that will serve the existing buildings as well as proposed developments that are in that area. And the sewer project is an even larger project that serves multiple interests. That's going to bring new pipe to replace old H pipe in that area. It's going to be bigger pipe, so it's going to have capacity to serve the developers, and the current sewer pipe does not have that capacity for major development. And it's also going to serve the future east plant pump station that's coming to the main plant. So all those benefits are kind of three birds with one stone. And yeah, that's the project in a nutshell. Any questions?
Thanks, Martin. Any questions or comments from the board? I appreciate the efficiency tonight, y'all, but we do have a little bit of time. So if you really want to dig into the sewer issue, no pun intended, actually, that was kind of considering. That was deep in my brain. Any comments, questions? Any final thoughts before I call, if there's a motion from Martin or Megan or? Okay, is there a motion? Councilor Travers.
I move to approve and recommend that the city council adopt the two-part motion set forth on Civic Clerk.
Thank you, Councilor Travers. Is there a second? Second by Councilor Barlow. Thank you. Any final thoughts on this before we vote? Seeing none, all in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you, Martin. Thank you, Megan.
Thank you.
All right, we'll move on now to item 5.1. We actually have two items related to the mayor's budget as we end our budgeting process here as the city for fiscal year 27. So first we'll speak to item 5.1, which is the large budget resolution for the annual appropriations and the budget for fiscal year beginning July 1st, 2026 and ending June 30th, 2027. we've talked a lot about the budget for the last several months. So my plan tonight on this item is to sort of do only a very high level reminder of just some high level pieces to the budget here down in Board of Finance. We can talk a little bit more up in council. I was originally, because I was wanting to be mindful of time, but certainly we'll leave some open some time here for also last questions that people might have on the board related to the budget itself and anything else that the CAO would like to also mention. So on a very high level, when we began this whole process, as the public and council certainly knows at this point, we were working hard to close a projected $11 million budget gap, which is continues to be part of a structural budget challenge the city faces. Each time we work on this, we narrow that gap a little bit more for prior out years. And I'm incredibly proud of our team led by our CAO, but also all of our department heads and their senior teams to work very incredibly hard in the details of this city's budget to look at creative ways to close this budget. And the biggest piece meaning that there was minimal impact on staff. We didn't have to lay off a single individual with this budget. And we also protected the benefits and salaries of our hardworking 700 or so city employees. Actually, maybe that's a little high for the general fund, but everyone understands my intention here is that we have a lot of folks who work for the city, and we wanted to make sure that we were not balancing this budget on the backs of hardworking individuals who put their full efforts into the support of the city. This budget also reflects a true commitment to affordability and equity, and really stewarding the city's finances in a strong direction. Equity, because we did solidarity budgeting this cycle to really look back over the last 2 years and make sure departments that had less of an impact from last year's significant cuts we had to make to balance things were stepping forward to take a little bit more on this year to even out across these 2 fiscal years. A strong financial stewardship, it also means making sure that we're continuing to deliver budgets that aren't including big tax increases for the residents who live here, because affordability is a big challenge for Burlington and frankly all of Vermont. And making sure that we're putting forward a budget that protects our core services, but also really has a heightened scrutiny for things that perhaps we just can't sustain at this time. And finally, to affordability, we have long tried to make sure that we are providing only modest growth year after year in these budgets to make sure there is a minimal impact on taxpayers. Of course, any increase for folks, especially on fixed incomes, is significant. But for this particular budget, I am proud of the fact that the end, what is your magical median household income again? Or median valued house is $353,000. That number will be burned in my brain. But on that particular house, at the end of the day, the annual increase that a Burlington resident who owns a property that has that median value will see for the entirety of the year an increase of just under $200. And that's I know that's, again, any increase is significant for folks, but as we look at trying to mitigate the cost of taxpayers in a highly inflationary environment, where the cost for the city, like everybody else, is also going up, and all the investments we really need to do with staff, I'm proud of the fact that that is very modest tax increase for voters. So with that, I think those are just the high level pieces I wanted to mention to remind us of what got us here today. The resolution also, well, actually, the last thing I'll say is the resolution itself reflects also a lot of back and forth negotiations between my administration, the Progressive Caucus, and the Democratic Caucus, working many hours. And I want to thank also Democratic Caucus leader Ali Schachter for working diligently alongside Progressive Caucus leader Jean Bergman, and my team for being at the table and doing what was required to really get us to a place of a fair compromise, where everyone gives up something to get us to a place where we kept the budget in balance still at the very end of this. So I hope with that, offered in good faith, here is the resolution. And with that, we can open it up. Well, do you have anything to add?
No, I think you covered it. I will just note that this afternoon, we did make one slight amendment. Councilor Travers suggested that we make an amendment, and that is on lines 110 to 112. And it is based on an action that we brought to this board, maybe the last meeting, which was related to making sure that we're rolling over any unspent donations received by REIB for Juneteenth. And so we have added that, so when we get ready for a motion, we'll make sure that we're moving the amended resolution. And that is my only point of clarification. I've done enough talking. Happy to open it up for questions and comments.
Thank you for noting that, Catherine. Questions and comments from the board? Councilor Barlow.
Well, and thank you. I will be supporting the budget tonight. I'm gonna reserve my comments for the meeting upstairs, but I appreciate all the work that has gone into this, and especially some of the work that went in the late hours of this budget. So that's all for now.
Thanks, Councilor Barlow.
I guess I would echo the same thing, may have a few more comments, but I do appreciate the amount of work that went into this.
Thank you, I appreciate that. Councilor Travers. Oh, thank you, Councilor Travers.
Can't make any comments later, so I'll make comments now. I guess I do have a couple very specific questions that I had relayed to the administration earlier. And I know that I have some colleagues on the council that have had some outstanding specific questions regarding some line items in the budget. At risk of getting into the minutia of things, I was before the full council, I was hoping we may be able to address a couple of these questions now. One of them is around the mayor's office budget. I know that one of my colleagues on the council had reached out to ask for an accounting of how we have been spending the line item on special projects in the mayor's office. I know that it is an item that for a few years running now has been at its current level. But I think to the extent that the administration is able to weigh in on that at all, that it may be helpful. The other piece is, and I think that this is likely actually a question more so for FY28, because I am very appreciative of a lot of the movement that was made here in recent weeks with respect to the budget, including our being able to secure additional funding for the Heineberg Center, which we heard from many members of the public about the importance of that center in their lives. I do know, though, that it's the intention as our aging council continues its work for any additional monies that we put towards this year to be characterized as one-time funds. And so as we think more so now towards FY28 and years after, I do know that at least part of the reason why we've increased our funding to a center like the Heineberg Center is because of the closure of the city's core program. And I don't know if you have anything to weigh in on this. It's likely a question that can wait until after as we think about FY28. But would just be curious to get an accurate accounting of how much in savings has been realized from the closure of the core program, balanced against the additional contributions that we've made towards the Heidelberg Center and other senior programming, including to assist former participants of the core program. I hope that question makes sense, but I know that those were two very specific questions that remained outstanding from some of my colleagues at the council, and just wanted to make sure that I named here. So I'll pause there for a moment to see if there's anything to add on those points.
Thank you, Councilor Travers. I'll start, and then Ms. Leo can add in anything I missed here. But to the mayor's office budget, and the line item is called Special Projects Emerging Needs. This has been, at least since I've been mayor, traditionally a backup for miscellaneous needs for the community that has fallen outside of the approved budget. So, and often these things come very last minute and needing a pass through from the mayor's office to make sure it happens. One example, and while we didn't have time to do multiple years in review, and I'll speak to this current year though in a little bit more detail in a second. But in fiscal year 25, just as a quick example, we were trying to transition things out of the regional programs that were sort of just awkwardly placed there, for lack of a better word. One, for example, is our annual MLK event that we have always put on for 20-something years, was placed in that particular budget, and we wanted to transition it to REIB. but it was missed in that year of budgeting. So to make sure that we were able to support that important event, it came out of that pot of money. As that's just an example of like miscellaneous needs that come up that are emergent in all the ways that we want to make sure the city can still support. To this particular fiscal year, one thing that's an every year expense, it might be different in fiscal year 27, correct me if I'm wrong on this, we were working on the annual report. The annual report has sat in the mayor's office in terms of expense and coordination. We did a collaboration this year with DFA, but $9,000 of that came out of the mayor, this particular line item to pay for this year's annual report and has sat in this line item for years past. That is probably predates my time. Next year, we are probably gonna do a stronger coordination with DFA because so much of that really is a clerk treasurer's type of document. So we might do that a little differently. I can't remember, correct me if I'm wrong on that one, but just looking to this year. The other part that has been the only other expenditures this year in that line item relate back to the core program actually. Because when we were negotiating about this time last year, there was an agreement for that one-time pot of money that Councilor Travis just mentioned of $50,000 for additional senior programming support, largely helping Heidelberg in particular, given that they were going to take the 10 or so seniors who had been frequently in the core program. And so we needed to frankly take a simple path of putting that structurally in the budget, and we put it into that line item in the mayor's office to be able to more nimbly put those monies out. And to date, $11,000 has been paid to the Heidelberg Center from this budget line item, and another roughly $2,000 has been paid to SSTA, which is a transportation service for seniors. And that is all that's been expended out of fiscal year 26, just to give you that example. If we had figured that out earlier last year, it probably would have been placed in parks or some other actual department, but it was a easier fix for us to make sure it got into the budget last year. To the core program, just briefly, even though I just mentioned it, for the core program, we'll have to do a little bit more analysis to specifically look at that. I want to roughly remind folks there were 3 different parks employees involved around the facilitation of the building, that floor of the building at the old North End Community Center. I also want to make sure you have the numbers of actual participants so you could see sort of a reminder of where we were with how many people were frequenting that program. But I've already asked the director of the Parks, Recreation, and Waterfront Department to begin that and to make sure that it is shared with whomever. I know Councilor Carpenter, you've been interested in that information, so we're working on that now. Just couldn't turn around for tonight with a full accounting of the savings portion from the city from winding down that program. Anything you want to add, Catherine?
I would just add sort of the bigger picture with this, sorry, I'm spacing on the regional emerging needs. Is that what we're emerging?
Regional programs.
Yes, special programs, emerging, we've called it several different things. And I said the word regional because it's in my mind. Because up until and through FY24, I looked starting at FY22. So FY22, 23, and 24. And before that, this was always budgeted in regional programs, and it was budgeted at a consistent $15,000. When we started to look at regional programs and what a sort of catch-all it had become in FY25, we started moving several things out, like the US Conference of Mayors went into the mayor's office budget, and this item did as well. So in FY25, we moved it into the mayor's office and we reduced it from 15,000 to 10,000. We submitted a budget last year in FY26. The mayor's budget had that line item also at 10,000. And as the mayor just mentioned, as a result of the negotiations with council, half of the 50,000 for senior services went into this line item, and the other half went into parks. And that's how we got to 35,000. And as she mentioned, some of that has gone to the annual report, and then another big chunk has gone to Heidelberg and STTA for the senior services. And I think that's all I have to add. Bill has gotten here just in time to avoid the question. And as we know, he needs a little bit more time for research. So I'm really just teasing it.
Well-timed entrance, though, I have to say. Any follow-up, Councilor Travis, before I go to Councilor Carpenter on the event?
Not on those specific questions, no.
Okay. Do you have a specific question to what we just covered, Council Carpenter? Because then I'm happy to come back to Councilor Travers for any additional comments.
And just a comment on the. Interim comment, that fundamentally senior services need to be. No pun intended, in our core budget. Where that lives is a conversation to be had, and I think there's somewhat of a fundamental misunderstanding around. When the shift went from core to a transition, whether that was one time or not. I think we need to work on that, and it needs to be understood that activity, that commitment, like most municipalities, and I'll tell you, some of our neighboring municipalities do better than us, have senior services as a core thing. It's not one time. So I'm not intending to change anything. I think it is understood, we'll have that conversation. I was a little taken aback that it sort of didn't have its own home, and we have to figure that out.
Appreciate that, Council Carpenter. There is language in the budget resolutions, as I'm sure you know, that specifically commits the city to, I forget the language exactly, not only looking at the Aging Council's recommendations,
Okay.
but also includes not only what I call base funding for the Heineberg Center, but an additional $38,000 for the upcoming year to continue to show good faith investment in our senior programming, while we also look towards fiscal year 28 and how we look a little bit more comprehensively to the other partners who support elders in our community and how the city can play a more complementary role to that, and thinking just again widely for the full breadth of the city there. So I appreciate that. Yeah. Councilor Travers, do you want the floor back for any final or continued thoughts on the budget?
I don't want to go on too much at length, other than to state appreciation for the opportunity, as you mentioned, Mayor, for us to work together. Thinking back to your State of the City address, I agree that we have an opportunity here to take advantage of some momentum Burlington has as it wraps up some really big years-long projects, and the Great Streets Main Street project in Burlington Square continue to rise, Champlain Parkway opening up soon. And I think, as you know, and as I believe your administration believes as well, there were opportunities in this budget for us to lean in further to ensuring really the vitality and vibrancy of our city, particularly our downtown. And so appreciative that the additional adjustments that we made to the budget in collaboration with the Progressive Caucus as well is putting more monies back in for the kinds of downtown events that so many people have been enjoying here in Burlington in recent weeks. And as we turn the corner into some warmer weather, putting additional monies towards additional security resources, particularly in our downtown hub. Asking to get additional resources to the police department for a referral bonus program to try to address some of our ongoing staffing challenges by incentivizing lateral hires of already certified police officers to come here to the city to hopefully hit the ground running. To put some money aside, and I know that there's still some work to be done on this, but to put some money aside and to earmark it for economic vitality for us to continue to work as a council in collaboration with your administration on hopefully some pilot projects to deliver financial incentives and support specifically for our small business community, which we know continues to, along with small businesses across the state and country, face some economic headwinds. And although we won't be taking action on this until, as I understand, our last meeting of the month, I think it's a great next step that as part of this budget, we will be removing the admissions tax as a gross receipts tax here in Burlington. Burlington is the only municipality in the state that charges this additional admissions tax beyond the local option sales tax that we already have elected to do here. And as we hopefully attract more big crowd gathering events here to Burlington, I hope that those who put these events on see that these initiatives are really an invitation for more of that here in Burlington. I will also say that I think that there is more work to be done, not on this budget, but as we look towards FY28. I have mentioned before in these budget discussions, and I'll mention again, I do still have some concern about our being able to fully realize some of the goals that we've established to meet the budget gap here. I know that there is still work to be done on increased collections, for example. I know that there are still some reliances on one-time funds here. So I do have some concerns about our fully realizing that. I think that we're going to really need to be very careful about constantly monitoring where our budget is to actuals as we move over the course of the coming year. And to the extent we're continuing to rely, if we do make the increased gross receipts tax on restaurants permanent for the coming year, to the extent we're going to continue to rely on that to make sure that we're continuing to regularly monitor how our business community is doing and how our gross receipts tax is doing, which we found, I think, to be a more volatile source of revenue than some of our other revenue sources. I do also think that there, as we enter into FY28, I've mentioned in the past, and I'll mention it again, and I think the mayor's office agrees that, because we've heard it from you as well, that structural issues remain in this budget and that there's still work to be done for us to address them if we're going to get out of this year in and year out cycle of always having to, it seems in recent years as our budget has increased, to address sizable gaps. So as we move on from FY27 and sort of cheer on the progress of FY27 versus FY26 versus FY25 in terms of more collaboration and coming together. I do hope that we'll be back together sooner rather than later, talking about FY28 and what additional efficiencies and savings we can find there. And I know that as part of these budget discussions, there were discussions around whether or not that's work that this Board of Finance can take on in terms of getting more under the hood of the budget with individual departments, or whether or not we should set up some sort of ad hoc budget committee to do that work. If I were to sort of voice some support here, it would be that we consider setting up a dedicated budget committee, because I think as we've seen here this evening, the Board of Finance has a lot of diverging interests, meeting in and meeting out. I think setting up a committee to transparently really focus on the FY28 budget to find those efficiencies could be really helpful as we head into next year. I suppose just the last thing that I'll say is that I'm looking forward to our voting on the budget this evening. I do just want to say out loud that because of the ongoing discussions really through the end of this week, we did not get full eyes on a detailed, and I'm not casting blame one direction or another, it's just the timing of the negotiations did not allow for the full budget resolution to be circulated until late last week. And from my perspective, it looks to be ready for action tonight. But in reading through it again today, there were some items that we noticed, like I appreciate the feedback with respect to the REIB and the donations line item and are adding some additional language. And so, whereas I think it makes sense to take action tonight to give some certainty to this now in mid-June and not wait until the end of this month. I do just want to flag that to the extent, for whatever reason, there are little pieces here or there that, for whatever reason, need some cleanup between now and the end of the month, including the gross receipts tax item that I know we need to take action on towards the end of this month. Just an openness to continuing to make sure that we're monitoring that to get this exactly right, and knowing that we have the backstop of our last meeting at the end of this month in case, along with the gross receipts item, there's any additional actions we need to take before the next fiscal year begins on July 1. So with that, I appreciate very much our work together on this budget. Look forward to the ongoing work towards FY28 and look forward to the vote this evening.
Thank you, Councilor Travers. Any final comments or thoughts from the board before I look to see if there's a motion on the first resolution? We have two related to the budget. Councilor Carl.
I just want to echo Councilor Trevor's comments about the budget committee, and I think that would be helpful to have it earlier than later, so we don't have all these little last minute questions about what's in and what's out. Obviously working on this year's budget, because we won't have next year's budget, but I think it will allay a lot of concerns. And I think in that process, help us, me, as a counselor, better understand, again, back to what's in the core budget and what maybe wouldn't be in the core budget. So I just appreciate the inclusion of that language and look forward to working on that as soon as we pass this tonight.
Thank you, Councilor. Any final comments? Any motions? Council Barlow,
Move to approve and recommend that the city council adopt the attached resolution.
Council Barlow, is there a second? Second by Council Carpenter. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much. It's a big vote, even though it was a short conversation. It was late. So on to our last deliberative item, item 5.2, which is a resolution where we set our annual tax assessments. So this is on the property grand list of the city, again, for fiscal year beginning July 1, 2026 and ending June 30th, 2027. I'm gonna give this one to you. This is way more
Excellent.
technical, so you get this.
This is always a bit awkward, the exact time when we pass the budget, but we have not passed the tax assessment because we have currently at this exact moment, no way to pay for the budget, 51% of the budget. So, the tax resolution and the budget resolution, I consider them twins. Because the tax resolution officially sets the tax rate. We have talked about it here. The rates are staying the same except for the 5 cents increase in police and fire that voters voted for. And then the retirement and debt service, which do not need voter approval, which fluctuate according to the budget. And we've also talked about during previous meetings that retirement went down a little bit and debt service went up a little bit, and they almost cancel each other out. Which is why our tax rate is up just about exactly the 5 cents that voters voted for. And we have included in the packet and civic clerk, both the resolution that has all of the writing out of things like 5 1/8 of a cent on the dollar of the grand list, which can be hard to follow, as well as the more familiar tax chart, in case you would like to look at that, that has all of the dedicated taxes that make up the municipal tax rate. I am happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Catherine. Questions on this resolution, our tax rate? Councilor Carpenter.
It's really a question, it's a sidebar comment around, or an ask of DFA to, at the end of the day, when we approve this, and the school board has produced their tax rate, do we have some sort of more consumer-friendly chart as people ask us, because, you know, it's a conversation of, geez, I didn't think it was gonna go up that much, and then you point to the fact that there's all these other taxes, including the school tax, so just an ask for something user-friendly.
Thank you, Councilor Carpenter. And while this is on the back of the property tax bill, I'm not sure how many people look at the back of the property tax bill, myself included. And I will just say that there was an interesting model out of a mayoral colleague out of Kansas somewhere. I forget what city she represents. She actually brought it to a meeting I was at. That was a really simple, basic, understand your city's budget, your budget as citizens. And I think we're gonna try to replicate that once we have the final budget, to not only illustrate on the how do we raise the revenue, but what your taxes go to with a little bit more clarity and simplicity. So thank you on the same line, so I appreciate that.
I think if we can start our budget being processed sooner and seek input, I mean, what do you want, what do you don't want, bigger picture, I mean, I came onto the council when there were a group of councilors who wanted participatory budgeting from the ground up, and I wasn't necessarily a fan of that either, but I do think showing people, you know, this is where your money went, is in connecting the dots is really important.
Thank you. Final thoughts on this item? Any motions on this item?
Who wants to move to raise the? I'll move to
Great motions. Thank you, Councilor Carpenter. So moved by Councilor Carpenter. Is there a second? Seconded by Council Barlow. Thank you. Any final thoughts? Seeing none, all in favor indicate by saying aye. Any opposed, nay? Motion carries unanimously again. Thank you very much. And so with no further business for the Board of Finance, I will adjourn this meeting at 5:45 PM. It's as if we actually magically. And we have one more meeting before we go, which is to convene our Burlington Community Development Corporation. So I'm going to call to order that body, the BCDC, which I like to say is my favorite band here in Burlington. And again, Monday, June 15th, 2026 at 5:45 PM. We have a very simple agenda for this item. This is our annual meeting to basically set the officers. So first we have our agenda though. So is there a motion on the agenda?
So moved.
Moved by Councilor Travers. Is there a second? Seconded by Councilor Carpenter. Thank you. Moving on to, we have, I'm sorry, calling the question. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay? Motion carries unanimously. On to public forum. Again, we'll go to members of the public in the room and then online. I see nothing but city staff and councilors in the room, so I'm gonna go online. Anyone like to address the BCDC online? Seeing no one, I will close public forum. Move on to our third item, which is the adoption approval of the minutes from our last meeting. Which I don't, when was that even? March
2025.
It's actually in the title. Mayor, read the title. March 24th, 2025. So is there a motion on the minutes from March of 2025?
The minutes.
Thank you, Council Barlow. Is there a second? Second by Council Carpenter. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay? Motion carries unanimously. On to our main item of business, which is the appointment of officers. It has been the tradition to move a slate that includes the mayor as the president, the council president as the vice president, and the CAO as the secretary as a proposed slate. Is anyone ready to make a motion of appointments for those three officers? This is the appointment of the officers for the board of the BCDC. So moved by Councilor Barlow, seconded by Councilor Carpenter. Again, the motion is to appoint myself as the mayor, as the president of BCDC, Councilor Travers as the president of the council, as the vice president, and then the CAO as the secretary of BCD. So any further discussion on this item, Councilor Barlow?
Yes, I think it'd be helpful for the listening public if we could just give, like, read the stuff, synopsis. Synopsis of what this body is. I know we did that last year. I think it's just confusing. So this is my third time dealing with it, so I kind of understand what it is and why it is, but without putting the mayor and CAO on the spot.
Of course, it's not a band, actually, even though I joke about it. Pepper, do you want to do a high level?
Yes.
So where it sits organizationally, almost with relation to CEDO in particular?
Absolutely. We will be back when we have more business and for BCDC, and we can talk more about it. But BCDC was actually formed, I don't know exactly when, but under Bernie. So it's been around for quite a while, and it is a separate, not legally separate, nonprofit arm of the city. And we partner with, it is managed by CEDO, but it is kind of housed in DFA because we are the ones who legally do the registration and because the CAO is the secretary. But it is a mechanism largely used by CEDO for community investments. We are trying to actually sort out if it's an entity that could also receive grants. And so in the past, we've done some creative things, such as the airport has a hangar that BCDC purchased, which we have now sold to the airport. We have a level of West Lake parking garage that was bought as part of a development for condos.
That's right.
And so I don't have all of the history of this, but it's essentially a mechanism to enable public-private partnerships. And it is not something that has been very active since COVID, but in order to keep this mechanism in good standing, we do need to have this annual meeting once a year, and Gumi and Kara from CEDO have been doing a lot of good research about what other cities and communities are doing with their community development corporations, and doing a lot of planning of what we could do with ours. And so this is really the first step. So come back because I think there's a lot of interesting opportunities on the table of different ways we could utilize BCDC.
Thank you, Catherine. And one thing on the horizon is you've heard us talk about the parcel the city owns at the back of that large parking lot where the Seaport project is happening. That is technically owned by BCDC. So this is an example of, as we especially start to imagine into our housing strategy and how we can leverage and utilize this tool in particular a little more strategically. There's likely going to be some further conversations sooner or later for BCBC. Helpful, Councilor Burrow?
Yes, I appreciate that explanation.
And I think there's just a lot of times where having a municipality with its governance owned directly doesn't work. You need a separate entity. And so I think at one point this was involved with City Market going way
Yes.
back. So there's a lot of, and I think it had at one point looked at housing, but then we had, for example, something like Housing Vermont or Evernorth Forum, so it wasn't necessary for housing, but it's all to say that it's probably better for many different reasons, that you don't always want the municipality and its governance to own the asset. You want something separate.
Thank you, Councilor Carpenter. Any final comments from the BCDC board? Okay, so I believe we have a motion on the floor for the slate of appointed officers. Any final thoughts before I call the question? Okay, so all in favor of the slate of appointments indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. And with no other business for BCBC, I will adjourn our meeting at 5:52 p.m. Thank you very much.